Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. Wanted to talk about something to do with Dungeons and Dragons because I haven't for a while, and I thought, well, what else is left for me to show? Then I realized, hey, you know what? I've been wearing these things in practically every D&D related video I've done, and I haven't really addressed them, so I thought, all right, let's talk about these. These are my bracers of defense. These go on the arm. I'm going to put them on in a second. But these are something most people will recognize. Anybody who's followed punk rock bands or kind of high fantasy art, or I don't know, even motorcycle gangs, you always see these things strapped on people's arms, and you think, oh yeah, this is to do with some kind of armor, I guess, or for people who want to be tough guys or something like that. They actually have a sort of surprising purpose historically. Now, I actually have something similar to these already. This over here is my Assassin's Creed Syndicate Gauntlet, which I have shown off before and really, really love. There's that little flywheel thing that shoots well, there's the blade, and there's the thing that fires off, and you can ascend buildings. Really, really like this thing, and it's kind of like a bracer. But in the game, Jacob Fry only wears one of these, and it's more designed for stealthy, assassin-y type action, that kind of stuff. Not quite what these bracers are for. And now, why am I calling these bracers of defense? That is, in fact, a Dungeons & Dragons term, because in D&D, we loved, especially in the old days, it's changed now with the newer rule sets, but we loved in a treasure pile if we would find a thing called bracers of defense. They look like this, or probably more ornate like the Assassin's Creed one. And what they would do is actually give you the equivalent of an armor class, which is a D&D term. Basically, it would be like wearing an entire suit of chainmail or plate mail or whatever. This would be all you needed, this magical device, this bracer of defense. And it made our lives a heck of a lot easier if you could just put on a pair of these instead of a whole suit of armor. So yeah, actual bracers of defense, highly sought after by any D&D crowd. Now they've changed the rules. I think now it just gives you a bonus to your armor class, whereas in the old days it was like, no, you are now wearing armor class 4 or something like that. Again, the D&D crowd will understand what that means. So, yeah, loved bracers of defense, but the surprising thing about that term is these bracers are not really an armor item. I think what was happening is you get the term bracer used in more modern context to indicate these things that you put on your arms, and you've seen them probably in, I don't know, Roman gladiator films and that kind of thing. But the actual most likely origin of that use of the bracer is that it was confused with the forearm armor pieces that were actually called a vambrace. I guess no doubt in various scenarios where knights or other mercenaries kitted out in armor, men-at-arms, as they were in various stages of being not 100% wrapped up in their armor. I don't know, let's say they had finished the battle, or they're having a meal, or it's morning and they just haven't gotten dressed yet. You would no doubt see them with some pieces of armor on their arms, because that's a fairly easy piece, and definitely these would have been very easy, or the chainmail or plate mail equivalent of these would have been quite easy to just throw on casually, or keep on. That probably what happened is people assumed that the vambrace, which is a piece of that armor, was actually some kind of armor item. And that's why it appears in a lot of paintings and fantasy works where people have assumed that the bits of leather or chain or plate or what have you that's around people's forearms is actually an armor type. That was the vambrace, which is a piece of a full suit of armor. They just thought, yeah, it's obviously those vambraces. Now, a bracer, which is in fact what these things are, has a completely different use, and I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm definitely going to put these things on in a second here. I got these at the Raven Armory, the same folks who made my axe and my shield and my sheath. They did leather gear as per the sheath. And I said to them, well, when I saw that they had bracers available to buy, I just thought, yeah, I'm definitely going to get these. I mean, they're very simple, very rudimentary pieces of leather that have been cut in a certain shape, stitched up with laces. I just slide my arm in, and away we go. And in fact, I am going to do that here in a second. In fact, to heck with it, let's put them on right now. This is going to be quite challenging to do on my own. Sometimes get Dee to help me out here, but anyway, let's see. Oh, I might be able to do it. I don't know how people in olden days did this on their own. They must have had a squire to set this all up for them. But anyway, the tricky bit's going to be tying the bow itself, but we'll figure that out. Yeah, so that's essentially what it's going to look like once I've got it on. I remember seeing bracers for the first time as a little kid, not in anything to do with fantasy at all. It was a cartoon that was serious when I was watching it, but has since taken on a more comedic tone, and that was Space Ghost. I believe brought by the same people who did Scooby-Doo, Hanna-Barbera, that crowd. And Space Ghost, yeah, he would actually use powered bracers. He had like 3 buttons on here, and he would shoot lasers and stuff through them. So that was kind of my introduction to whatever the heck this thing is that you put on your arm. Now, pardon me while I try to tie this one-handed. That is the downside, is trying to tie something with only one hand. It's going to be a lot of fun when it's my left hand. All right. Yeah, basically just held that with my teeth and pulled on it. I put a very loose knot in here because I don't want to be trapped in this thing. So when I'm feeling fancy, I tend to do it as an actual bow. What do you call it? Like a normal knot you would use for tying your shoelaces and stuff. But I'm not going to try and do that here. Anyway, there's one of the bracers. Now the tricky one on the left-hand side. So let's go carefully here. I might have to relace this as well. Interestingly, so now these bracers tend to be for guys in most contexts. I mean, certainly as far as fantasy and depictions of Roman gladiators, that kind of thing. But I do have somebody that I'm a big fan of who has something kind of similar to bracers on her, and yet they're not really bracers. Now, you're not going to be seeing me tying this too well because of the angle of the camera. Apologies for that. And now that my hands are all tied up, I'm sure as heck not going to try and move the camera. As you know, I'm a big fan of Chun-li from Street Fighter. And what's interesting about her outfit or her look is the fact that she actually has things on her arms that protect her with spikes on them. And I remember thinking to myself, that's a weird choice. Like, considering the rest of her outfit is kind of like a dancer's chi-pow, and her buns in the hair, like she's a combination of a whole bunch of different weird elements. And so why the heck has she got these things around her arms, which are, I think they're called wrist cuffs. If you try and search, if you do a Google search for Chun-Li and spikes, I think wrist cuff is how that thing is described. But I always wondered, okay, so why has she got those on her? It doesn't seem to serve a purpose in combat. I mean, is she going to be stabbing or, like bashing people with her spikes as she's in the middle of a fight with them? Doubt it. And then I remember watching somebody wearing these things with spikes on them on television. There was a show, I don't know if it's still running anymore. Ooh, can I do this without having to use the teeth? Here comes the challenge. Hang on, I might be able to do it. No. Okay, I got to use the teeth. Hang on. All right, that sort of got it. Now I just need to make it tight without being too tight. Yeah, I watched on television, there was a series called Billy the Exterminator on A&E, where this very friendly guy would go around various parts of the U.S. and get rid of any kind of nasty animals that people were complaining about. There we go. There's the bracers in place. You get a general gist there of what they're like and They got that real punk rock kind of a look to them. But Billy the Exterminator, so he would always have these things on, but they had rows and rows of spikes, much like Chun-Li. And I remember thinking, I mean, is he just trying to be looking like a badass? Is that what his whole thing is? He trying to be punk rock and stuff? And he actually answered a question I think somebody had written in or something, or maybe one of the people he ran into for his show was saying, why do you wear these bracers, these crazy-looking arm gauntlet things? Are you going into war? And he pointed out something that I thought, hey, that kind of makes sense. In his line of work, he's often dealing with like snakes or maybe alligators, I'm not sure. Certainly in the case of snakes, though, something that's going to wrap itself around your arm. If you got a bunch of spikes on here, whatever you're holding is not going to try and grab you. Like, it's not going to pull you with its own tail, or I guess if it's a bigger animal, like it's first of all going to protect you from any scratches, and having spikes on this thing is actually going to protect you as well. So I just thought that explains a lot why sometimes you see these things, especially with like the punk rock bands or the bikers and stuff. They've got spikes on there. It's mostly for looks, but it does actually serve a practical purpose. I guess that makes me ask, is Chun-Li going to be wrestling some animals? There they are. There are the bracers. That's how they go on, and that's how they have that look. I think to actually describe what these things are used for, I'm missing a piece, a prop, if you will, but we'll talk about it in a second. They're not actually a defense. I mean, they are, but not in the sense that I've discussed so far. It's not like somebody's going to be swinging a sword onto your arm. If so, these leather ones sure as heck aren't going to provide much protection. And the leatherish ones are the ones you see the most often depicted in historical records, but also in fantasy films and gladiator shows and all that kind of stuff. So why the leather ones? Why are they so common? What is it that, hasn't, and did they inspire that look punk rock bands have? For example, I have a feeling since the depiction of these things in a lot of medieval fantasy must have been, on the covers of albums or what have you, I'll bet you anything, a lot of artists that had their work that showed these things being used and worn were probably also the subject of a lot of like tattoos and that kind of thing. And no doubt, the crowd that would then head out on their motorcycles and that wanted to have some kind of medieval heavy metal, kind of bad guy or tough warrior look. And that's maybe why these things became associated with bikers so much. Remember I mentioned how with Chun-Li, her thing around her arm is actually called a wrist cuff. That's not what if you try to find these in a way that you could wear them, like if you were searching on Amazon or something and you tried searching for that, you wouldn't really get much. You'd mostly run into bracelets and things like that for the ladies. These things, I actually did a search online and I thought, well, they're kind of biker bracers, so let's try searching for that. Lo and behold, you'll get results of biker bracers. Things like this with, flames on them and that kind of stuff. So the term bracer, which is actually not correct, this is, if anything, these ones are bracers, but the device that you're thinking of for like rock bands and medieval warriors, those are vam braces, the remains of a whole suit of armor. The fact that if you do a search for biker bracer, which is an incorrect historical term, will give you this thing as a result, shows that the idea that this bracer, this thing that in Dungeons and Dragons terms we were all so thrilled to find if we ever did, it's kind of expanded beyond its original purpose. So what's its original purpose? All right, I'll give you a demo of exactly what this thing's actual use was historically. Unfortunately, you're going to have to use your imagination because it's kind of one thing in my D&D weapon collection I don't actually own. Imagine, if you will, I have in this hand a longbow and the string here. And I've lined it up. I've got my fellow with the apple on his head in the distance in the field. And I've now got the arrow in this hand. I have cocked the arrow. I've pulled back. I'm aiming at the guy, and I release, and I, with luck, actually hit the apple and not the poor fella underneath it. Look back at where I am with this bow and arrow, if you can imagine a bow sitting here. I've pulled back a lot farther than the camera's going to show, and I've let go, and the arrow has vaulted off to my target. No doubt I got a bullseye. I'm going to say I did. But what you're not remembering is this piece of string that has launched this arrow is vibrating at an incredible rate, and it's going to come right flush up against my skin. That's going to hurt like the dickens. So this is actually why these bracers were originally developed. It had nothing to do with looking like a badass or, somebody fighting you or doing some kind of weird kung fu moves or anything like that, or being in a punk rock band. It was actually for archers. When they were releasing their arrows, the bowstring was striking against their skin and burning the heck out of them, no matter what kind of protective clothing I'm sure they had on underneath. It was decided, you know what, we're going to get these leather bracers, and that's actually going to take all of that, absorb all of that energy and power, and it's going to keep us from burning our hands every time we fire an arrow. Somebody that I'm subscribed to, who I've mentioned before, way back when in my old Assassin's Creed videos, NUSensei. I'll put a link below to his channel. He's all about archery. He will give you all the information you could possibly need to know about bracers, proper equipment, all of that kind of stuff. I wish I had a bow and arrow that I could borrow from him, but he's in Australia, so it's a bit far to just ship me a bow and arrow for one little video. Imagine I've got a bow and arrow that I've borrowed from NUSensei, and he will definitely sound off as to all of the details that these bracers have. Anyway, so I just wanted to show off my bracers of defense. They've actually been, for such a simple little piece of leather with a laced string on them, they've shown up on a lot of my videos. They speak the Dungeons and Dragons look, and I just love them. So I hope you like that little historical lesson, and until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.